Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Book Summary, the channel where we turn life-changing books into powerful insights you can use. In our last episodes, we explored The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel, breaking down chapters 1 through 10. We learned that money decisions aren't just about spreadsheets, they're deeply emotional, personal, and often irrational. We covered why luck plays a bigger role than we like to admit, why getting rich is not the same as staying rich, and how saving is more powerful than flashy investing. But in today's episode, we're going deeper. Chapters 11 to 15 tackle some of the most fascinating and uncomfortable truths in the book, like why being reasonable beats being rational, how pessimism sells more than optimism, and how people often believe anything if it helps them feel in control. We'll also see how the stories we tell ourselves can shape and sometimes sabotage our financial choices. These chapters are raw, real, and will make you question the way you think about risk, confidence, and even your future. Ready to challenge your beliefs? Let's dive into chapters 11 through 15. Chapter 11. Reasonable, rational when it comes to money. We often strive for absolute rationality, aiming to make perfectly logical decisions based on data and formulas. But Morgan Housel argues that this approach is fundamentally flawed because humans aren't spreadsheets. Instead, he suggests that striving to be reasonable is a far more effective and sustainable path to financial success than chasing pure rationality. Our emotional wiring and the unpredictable nature of life mean that a perfectly rational strategy might be impossible to stick with. Housel illustrates this point with a fascinating, albeit bizarre, historical anecdote about Julius Wagner-Jauregg, a 19th-century psychiatrist. Wagner-Jauregg, recognizing that high fevers could sometimes cure infections, decided to treat syphilis patients by infecting them with malaria, which would induce a fever. In a technical, physiological sense, causing a fever might be a rational way to combat infection. But from a human perspective, intentionally giving someone malaria to cure another disease is profoundly unreasonable. It highlights how something can be technically true but contextually absurd when applied to real life and human beings. Another powerful example Housel shares is that of Harry Markowitz, the Nobel laureate who pioneered modern portfolio theory, a mathematically complex framework for optimal investment. When asked how he invested his own money, Markowitz confessed that he simply split his portfolio 50-50 between bonds and equities. His reasoning? He wanted to minimize future regret, the pain of missing out on gains if the market soared, or the agony of massive losses if it crashed. This wasn't a mathematically optimal strategy according to his own theories, but it was what allowed him to sleep at night. It was reasonable, even if not perfectly rational. The actionable takeaway here is to prioritize financial strategies that allow you to sleep well at night. Don't chase the highest possible returns if it means constant stress or a strategy you can't commit to. The emotional commitment to a pretty good plan that you can stick with for the long haul is infinitely more valuable than a perfectly rational one that you abandon during tough times. In finance, consistency and endurance are the true competitive advantages, and these are fostered by reasonable, emotionally sustainable choices. Chapter 12. Surprise. One of the most persistent illusions in finance is that history is a perfect map to the future. We study past market performance, economic cycles, and historical events, believing they hold precise answers for what's coming next. But Housel delivers a crucial punch. Things that have never happened before happen all the time. The world is constantly evolving, driven by innovation and change, which means over-reliance on past data as a signal for future conditions is a fallacy. Human emotions, greed, fear, and insecurity tend to be stable over time, making broad historical patterns useful, but specific trends and exact causal relationships are always in flux. To drive this home, Housel examines the enduring appeal of Benjamin Graham's classic book, The Intelligent Investor. Graham, a highly successful investor and Warren Buffett's mentor, provided specific formulas and criteria for value investing. When Housel first encountered these, they seemed like a clear, step-by-step guide to getting rich. However, as he notes, many of Graham's precise formulas, like buying stocks below their net working assets or avoiding those above 1.5 times book value, simply don't work in today's markets. Very few stocks trade that cheaply anymore, and strictly following such rules would limit one to only certain sectors, like insurance and banking. This isn't to say Graham's book lacks wisdom. It's filled with it. But it highlights that specific how-to guides from the past can quickly become irrelevant as markets evolve. The historians as prophets fallacy leads us to mistakenly believe that past experience perfectly qualifies one to predict the future, when in fact, it often leads to overconfidence rather than accurate forecasting ability. The common phrase, "it's different this time," is often used mockingly, but Housel, through citing John Templeton, suggests that the world is different at least 20% of the time, and those changes are what matter most. The actionable takeaway is to embrace humility regarding predictions and focus on enduring human behaviors. Instead of trying to predict exact market movements or economic shifts based on historical precedents, understand that the emotional drivers of financial decisions, like greed, fear, and responses to stress, are what truly remain constant. Learn from these broad, stable patterns of human behavior rather than chasing specific, fleeting trends from the past. Recognize that the biggest surprises often come from unexpected places because innovation and adaptation constantly reshape the financial landscape. Chapter 13. Room for error. Life and markets are inherently unpredictable. Morgan Housel argues that the most crucial element for long-term financial success isn't about being right all the time, but about building in room for error, or a margin of safety, to survive the inevitable curveballs. This isn't a conservative strategy to avoid risk, but rather a powerful tool to increase your odds of survival and, therefore, your ability to stay in the game long enough for compounding to work its magic. Housel illustrates this with the example of blackjack card counters. These players tilt the odds slightly in their favor, but they never bet everything, even when the odds are good. They understand that any single hand is still a game of chance, and if they lose too much on one hand, they might not have enough money to continue playing when the odds are truly in their favor. This highlights the core principle: you must survive to succeed. Another compelling example is Bill Gates. In the early days of Microsoft, Gates insisted on having enough cash in the bank to cover a full year of payroll, even if no payments came in. This wasn't about maximizing returns. It was about ensuring survival and avoiding ruin. This deep-seated paranoia, coupled with long-term optimism, allowed Microsoft to endure unexpected challenges and ultimately thrive. Similarly, Warren Buffett often holds ample cash, not just for opportunities, but to prevent being forced to sell assets during bear markets. This emotional and financial buffer can be incalculable in its real return, as it prevents desperate, ill-timed sales that can wipe out a lifetime of gains. The actionable takeaway is to build a financial buffer for the unexpected, not just for known risks. Your financial plan should anticipate that things won't go according to plan. This means maintaining a frugal budget, fostering flexible thinking, and keeping adequate cash reserves so you're never forced into a disastrous financial decision due to unforeseen circumstances. This gap between what you could endure and what's emotionally possible to endure is your true margin of safety, allowing your investments to compound undisturbed over the longest possible time. Chapter 14. You'll change. It's a common human tendency to underestimate how much we will change in the future. We make plans and decisions today based on who we are and what we want right now, often assuming our desires, values, and goals will remain largely static throughout our lives. Housel calls this the end of history illusion. This psychological blind spot can have profound implications for long-term financial planning, as decisions made by our past self can become burdensome or irrelevant to our future self. Housel draws on the research of psychologist Daniel Gilbert, who found that people from 18 to 68 consistently underestimate how much they will change. This phenomenon often leads to sunk costs, where we anchor our future decisions to past efforts and investments, even if they no longer serve our evolving selves. Housel contrasts this with Daniel Kahneman's remarkable ability to completely abandon extensive work without regret, often starting anew on a project. Kahneman famously stated, "I have no sunk costs," meaning he didn't allow past effort to dictate future choices. This chapter highlights that while compounding, the magic of letting money grow over decades requires consistency, our human nature often struggles with doing the same thing for a lifetime. We change careers, lifestyles, and priorities, which can interrupt long-term financial plans. forcing your future self to adhere to the rigid plans of a past. Different self can lead to regret and unhappiness. The actionable takeaway is to build flexibility into your long-term financial plans, acknowledging that your goals and desires will evolve. Don't be afraid to abandon financial goals or strategies that no longer align with who you are becoming. Embrace adaptability and view your financial journey as a dynamic process rather than a fixed trajectory. This willingness to let go of sunk costs allows you to course correct and ensure your money always serves your present and future happiness, rather than being trapped by past decisions. Chapter 15. Nothing's free in finance. Everything worthwhile has a price, but this price isn't always obvious or monetary. Morgan Housel emphasizes that the costs of successful investing often come in the form of emotional pain, volatility, fear, doubt, uncertainty, and regret. Many investors try to achieve great returns without paying the price, attempting to get something for nothing, which, like shoplifting, rarely ends well. Housel illustrates this by showing the reality of market returns. The S&P 500 might have delivered impressive average annual returns over decades, but this came with constant, significant drawdowns. For example, Netflix stock surged over 35,000% from 2002 to 2018, but it traded below its. And there you have it, chapters 11 through 15 of The Psychology of Money. These chapters remind us that when it comes to money, humans don't operate like machines. We operate through emotions, stories, and beliefs. We want to feel safe, validated, and in control. Even if that means making choices that aren't mathematically perfect, we saw that being reasonable often wins over being rational, and that the loud voice of pessimism can cloud our judgment, even when the world is improving. We also explored how our personal experiences, biases, and the narratives we cling to can shape our financial reality, for better or worse. So, here's the real takeaway. Your money mindset matters more than any market trend. The way you think, the way you feel, and the stories you believe will shape your financial future. If this episode helped you think differently, be sure to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs it. And if you haven't already, grab a copy of The Psychology of Money. It's packed with even more insights that can truly change your life. Until next time, stay grounded, stay curious, and keep building a wiser relationship with your money.